My name's Brian Lynch, and I'm an adjunct professor, adjunct faculty at New York University. I teach trumpet, and I teach ensemble. I actually, right now, I'm teaching an ensemble where all the members of the ensemble, no matter what their instrument, study privately with me. So I really teach improvisation and style on all instruments here. I started playing trumpet at the age of 9 in school, and I enjoyed playing the trumpet, but I enjoyed it and thought I was okay at it, but I never really thought it would be something that it would become my life's work. And I actually even quit playing trumpet for a year or two around the time I got out of junior high school. But when I got back when I got into high school, that's when I started hearing jazz music, and I'm hearing. I think the biggest initial impression was John Coltrane and Miles Davis, and then after that, hearing Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard. After I got hip to a little bit of stuff, but Miles Davis made a big impression, and so did John Coltrane. And little by little, I became more and more intrigued by the music, and felt like it was something I really wanted to find out about. So I played in rock and roll and rhythm and blues bands in high school, and learned on my own pretty much, though I took lessons from a guy in the symphony for my technique a little bit later in the game. But I sort of learned a lot of my music just I wasn't even in the school music program until my last year in high school, as far as my high school career went. And learned a lot of things just hanging out with other young players and trying to sit in a little bit. Didn't know too much about chords and anything like that, and you try to play by ear. But when I got into music school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I went to a place called the Wisconsin Conservatory of Music. There were a lot of very fine local players teaching there, so they were the ones who really took me under their wing, and I learned kind of in an apprenticeship sort of way, almost very similar to the way I'm teaching here now, is that it wasn't sitting in front of a blackboard as much as it was just playing and absorbing things from players who were playing very well. Some of my initial professional experiences, I played with a gentleman named Buddy Montgomery, Wes Montgomery's brother. I played in his group, and when I was about 19 years old, and I also played in a rhythm and blues group called The Brighter Side of Darkness. They're the guys who had the big hit with Love Jones back in 1974, so that dates me pretty well. After I left Milwaukee, I moved to San Diego for about a year, and I played with Charles McPherson when I was there, a great alto saxophone player. From him, I really learned a lot. I learned a lot in school, but hanging around from him, I learned a lot about something that became very influential to me and also to the way I teach, and that's the concepts of Barry Harris. His teaching concepts, the way that he conceptualizes the music of bebop and is able to transmit it to other players in a theoretical way really well. I think Barry Harris is one of the most profound thinkers about jazz music that's ever lived, in terms of being able to explain the music. So after I moved to New York in 1981, and I played with many. I started developing a real love for Latin music even before I moved to New York. But after I moved to New York, I had the opportunity not only to get into the jazz scene, but to get into the Latin music scene, where I played with people like Hector Lavoe, Ray Barretto, a guy named Angel Canales. That was one of the first recordings I ever did was with him. And then finally, ending up with Eddie Palmieri, who I've been playing with for about the last 18 years now. But on the jazz side, I played with some of my most significant associations have been with Horace Silver, who I played with for 3 years in the 82 through 85, Toshiko Akiyoshi's band, who I played with for 6 years. Of course, one of my biggest achievements was to be able to play with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. I was Art's last trumpet player, playing with him from 1988 to 1990. I've also played with Jack McDuff, Gene Harris and the Philip Morris Super Band, Benny Golson. I've played with Prince, recorded with him. I've played with done a lot of recording in the Latin scene. I've recorded and arranged and produced a lot of dance music over the last 10 years. You know, as a trumpet player, I have to have a pretty well-defined and disciplined practice routine just to get, you know, just to keep the sound going on the instrument. You know, every day I have a certain dedicated warm-up routine, which, you know, consists of different aspects. You know, practice on the mouthpiece alone, practicing certain kind of long note studies, like you know, some of these things people call flow studies. They have having to do with like slow moving long notes that still kind of move around like, you know, and expand the range from the middle out to different parts of the horn. You know, lip flexibilities, which you know, increase your ability to control all the different registers of the horn, make them sound like they're in the same place. You know, articulation studies, things like that. So those are just like the kind of musical calisthenics that I have to go through to keep in shape. You know, then there's the things I'm practicing musically, because I'm always trying to both learn new things on you know, the instrument musically, and also keep on referring back to the basics and solidifying them. You know, like I mean, you know, people ask me what I'm practicing, and I say, well, you know, I'm practicing major scales. They think I'm being facetious or flip or something like that, and I'm not at all. I mean, I'm really serious. It's like, you know, I haven't learned how to play the major scale yet. I mean, if you think about it, really learning how to play a scale is a pretty major thing. You know, it's very endless. I might play some things on the mouthpiece alone. You know. You know, I'm trying to keep the sound, like, have a certain kind of, like, some you know, when you're doing mouthpiece things, it's important to have a lot of harmonics in the sound, not to have a dull kind of sound, but something that's got a lot of sort of, almost like, it's almost not nasal, but there's a certain amount, there's a lot of harmonics in the sound. I actually do a lot of exercises like this, either with a metronome, or I even practice with some play-along, like, recordings that have some of these exercises. Like, there are certain books that I work out of that have some play-along books, like, that are involved with them, you know. Like, one example of one of the flow study type exercises that I play is they're the sort of things that the great teacher Vincent Chikowitz, like, you know, taught and passed down to all his students. And, you know, I studied with Professor William Fielder from Rutgers privately on the side for a while. And so he's, you know, both from him and then through all the great players who studied with Prof, you know, I've gotten hip to some of these flow studies. So one example of a flow study would be this. And again, I do these with a metronome as well. Then they go down chromatically. and so on and so forth. You go down to 7 positions. Now, when you play these, as you ascend, you want to think about the notes being maybe a little bit farther out. So almost like, say, if the G, the note you first start playing, is maybe a foot out in front of the horn, then the C is maybe going to be 2 feet out in front of the horn. That much farther out there, right? And so it's even a little bit farther, more farther out as you ascend further. So hard to do one-handed, but that's one of the ideas. Another idea is that you might want to keep in mind is that we always want to feel that we're bringing the registers together. So that if you're playing something like, I'll play a lip flexibility exercise for you, for instance, like. You want to make that all sound, you want to make that all feel like it's this. You dig? So that one thing that great brass teacher who I practice his exercises, James Stamp, said is like, when you go up, think down, and when you go down, think up. So you keep the notes in their places, so you don't sag when you go down in a lip flexibility. Like you hear this sometimes, right? And then you kind of don't have control of it, and then you kind of overshoot it, and the note sags down. So to counteract that, you think up as you go down. And the same thing for going up. It's kind of like a little complementary sort of image I have in my head a lot when I'm playing exercises like these, that I'm almost my eyes will kind of roll up as I go down and the other way around. So, I really try to have that idea of keeping the notes where they feel like they're in the same place all the time through all these exercises I do. And so, these lip flexibility exercises, when you do them with that in mind, they train your tongue, because the tongue is what makes the pitches different from high to low. When you go from ta to e, ta, e, ah, so this is my tongue. Of course, I can't get the shape of it exactly, but that's sort of the general idea. The kind of tonguing that I employ the most is sort of a legato single tongue. And so in my lines, I probably rely a lot on the airstream and a sort of overall legato kind of sound, and then the valve changes, making part of the articulation, sort of a la Freddie Hubbard or Donald Byrd or players of that kind of style. But developing a good, a fairly serviceable, quick single tongue is real important in doing that. So, one thing I do is I'll just tongue a single note for maybe about a minute at a comfortable tempo. And when I get a little bit, when I need to take a breath, I'll take a breath. And so on and so forth. And then from there, maybe then I'll do some tonguing exercises like. Once in a while, you have to kind of iron out the kinks in it, your delivery. So on and so forth. You know, you can also do things like Clark exercises, of course, or you can. An extension of the Clark is to take something like the Clark second and go up and down the scale with it. You know, some variations you can do on it. Breathing's really important. I mean, this, you know, that's the whole key getting a good sound is to use the air properly. And so, to use the air properly, you have to breathe. You have to breathe in a balanced fashion and take a full and complete breath. I mean, I don't tend to get nuts about like having a conception of breathing because I think breathing is a very natural thing. If you just let yourself breathe naturally, then you're going to find that you're breathing right. But we get into like we get into bad habits about breathing, you know, shallow, just breathing from up here instead of taking a complete breath. You know, not just breathing down here either, but breathing all the way through, what they call a yoga breath, where you're breathing from the top, the middle, and the bottom. Everything should expand sort of together, and you know. And I used to think that you should just take the air down and fill up from the bottom to the top. But now I'm thinking more in terms of that you should try to fill up everything at the same time. But again, just really natural. I mean, yawning is the most natural kind of full breath that you can have, you know, because it's the body's need to get oxygen into the brain. So, you know, something like a yawn. Whenever I even say yawn, I'm going to start yawning any minute now. But just, you know, I mean, for me, it's really important to be relaxed, you know, overall. Try to work with tension, you know, monitor tension in your upper body because that can really cut your breath off. One thing that I found is an important thing is that you want to make sure that when you breathe that you don't stop the breath between your inhalation and your exhalation. But, you know, so not to go like, right, but you got to go. This is another reason to do things like long tones with a metronome, because you can time your inhalation on the metronome. Something Prof. Fielder always says is that you should let the air surprise the body, not the other way around. The body shouldn't be all set for that air to come in and resisting it. It's like you should just go 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in on the upbeat. So the body doesn't have time to tense up before it's just loose and the air is just going. If you have that kind of attitude with everything, with the breathing, things are going to go a lot more natural. You're going to have a lot less problems with missing the first note, you know, having a bad attack. You know, when I'm playing, I may be playing and I may get into a little bit more of a tense state, you know, through, you know, you're holding the horn up and you're exerting pressure. So if I have a little pause in something, I may want to like get out of a habit by changing the position a little bit. I've studied the Alexander technique a lot, and I work with some teachers I have who are adept in that, and they, it kind of helps me with checking out how tension has a tendency to sneak into your body when you're playing. So for me, it's like you can just get out of it and you could kind of shift your feet a little bit or something like that. Just let some of that stuff go. It's like we carry a lot up here, and that we're blowing through this area here. So your shoulders and your back and get sometimes the horn can really weigh me down. So that's when I know that I gotta get out of myself a little bit, and just get there's easy ways to get rid of the tension. Just changing your position when you're playing can be one of them. You got to be aware of your posture and things like that too when you're playing, and make sure you don't lock your knees when you're playing. You want to play, just very balanced and relaxed. I try to play. If I can play with relaxation, I can play. I can play all night. Playing high is just an extension of playing right in the middle register. I never practice high notes. I just I practice. My warm up centers around the area between pedal C and high C. Centering. First note I play every day is my G in the middle of the staff, and I work out from there. And if I can play, when I get to the point where I can play exercise, like something from the Earl Irons book, for instance. Make the low notes come out. Have that kind of. I kind of work up to where I can play within that area of the horn. Between high C and the bottom of the horn, I feel like I'm pretty good. Whatever is above that is just an extension. And I'm not a double high C player either, though. Even though I may have played a couple in my life, but that's not my job really. There's a lot of different things that I can do in terms of expressing music. Of course, when you're a professional musician and you're teaching and and I write a lot of music too, so I have to put a lot of time into that. That practice time can be at a premium. So there's never enough time to really do everything. But I can say that even many years into my professional career as I am, I still have pretty much the same concerns in terms of what I work on to play the music, to play jazz, as I did when I was a student. One part that's very important to me is to cultivate and keep in shape the motor. Again, there's more motor skill things, but in a different way from the calisthenics. The ability to be able to play fluently in all the keys of my instruments. So that is to say, like be able to play my scales well and fluently. Now, again, that almost sounds like a kind of too simple or almost a facetious sort of statement, but it's really very serious. There's a lot of things that you can do on a scale, any scale, whether it's major or minor, that can be a challenge even to somebody who's been playing a long time. So I may just work on some major scale patterns, for instance. It's important to be able to play any scale, the major scale, from all the different points, all the different modes of the scale. Okay, so all the modes of the major scale. Now, you can also work on playing a scale in segments, right? So that means varying the contour, I can do that, you know. So, and let's not forget playing a scale in triplets, say. So on and so forth. A lot of different ways to do that. In my ensemble, I like to play with my students because that for me is the most, you know, it's the best way to transmit, you know, matters of style and you know, topics of just, you know, the whole atmosphere and how to play the music, you know, much more than any kind of verbal instruction, you know, could convey. I mean, that's how I learned with, you know, playing with people that had experience. And so I'm trying to, you know, pass that along. So, you know, playing with my students and I'm an integral part of the ensemble that I teach. So in a way, they're sort of apprenticing with me as I do the ensemble. I'm bringing in music and I'm sort of coaching them as they go along, trying to, well, there's fundamentals, there's basics, and those are the things, you know, when I come out of the ensemble, then I have plenty of material to cover for their own private lessons about, you know, the things that they're doing on all their own instruments. But as an ensemble, that's what I get to when I'm working with them in the class itself. You know, things about style, also just fundamental, you know, basic things about blending together, playing, you know, things in the same time and in the same kind of feel, you know, chord voicings for the rhythm section. You know, are we swinging? Are we swinging together? Are the drums and bass hooked up? Are the piano and the guitar, when they're comping together, getting in each other's way, or are they complementing each other and the soloist? You know, all those kind of things are sort of things that they're, you know, topics every week. You know, as we go through the different repertoire. I've been, in the last maybe 6 or 7 years, been doing more of this sort of thing. Of course, I do a lot of workshops and clinics in colleges and conservatories all over, but this is my second year at NYU. I also teach at a music conservatory in the Netherlands, where I go over there as a guest lecturer a number of times a year, like 4 weeks a year, 1 week, you know, at 4 different periods, and I teach all kinds of different things when I go over there: theory, ear training, ensembles, you know, arranging, everything, my own instrument. Say in this sort of class, ensemble-wise, playing together, being able to swing, which, you know, that's the style of swinging and getting that feeling of forward motion and relaxation at the same time. Also, just, you know, playing together, being able to find each other in the rhythm section. That's the thing I find with rhythm section players. For horn players, is playing together, you know, with each other and blending together as an ensemble. Then it's addressing all the particular things about, you know, solo playing. Everybody, you know, I encourage to have their own style of playing and be able to complement each other. But they've got to make the changes too. And also they've got to have a sense of, telling a story. I encourage my students to, whatever they're practicing, whatever they're studying, it should be in the service of being able to make a statement when they play the horn, when they make a solo contribution. You have to foster awareness of time in the players, and this doesn't go just for rhythm section players, for everybody in the ensemble. What I find a lot of times is that the drummer's playing, and he's doing his thing. He thinks he's swinging. The bass player's playing. He thinks he's swinging, but they're not listening to each other. So one guy's over here and one guy's over there. One thing with a lot of learning players too is that they have the surfaces of what they're doing kind of together, but the deep part they still have to work on a little bit. So maybe they can play a tempo, but they can't really hold it 100% all the time without it jerking a little bit at certain places. Like I just noticed something today is like one thing I'm going to talk to with my bass player in his lesson is that I'm going to say, well, if you listen to yourself, and I, what I do is I record all these rehearsals on a MP3 recorder, and then I put it up on a website where they can download the rehearsal and they can listen to it, And so everybody has an opportunity to hear what's going on from week to week. I'm really a lot into that, trying to use some of the newer technology in order to make things easier, and so people can have a little bit, quicker access to what they need to know. Anyhow, I'm going to say to Rick, is that the front of the note's good, but the back of the note isn't solid enough. So when you go to the next one, sometimes it doesn't. You're not getting to the next note. You don't have control of getting to the next note. This sometimes will happen at the end of the measure. So it'll be like doom, 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 doom. So there's a little bit of insecurity when you get to the next bar, or when you're getting to the next chord change or something like that. This comes from perhaps not having. It could be a number of factors. It could maybe having to work on the intonation, because if you're not quite sure where to put your finger down on the string to get the note exactly in tune, there's going to be a little insecurity going to that place where you have to go to a new area on the fingerboard. I'm not a bass player, but I can make a few educated guesses about it, from observing. We've got to keep on encouraging the students to refine their technical skills and their conceptual skills at the same time when they go together hand in hand. That's the way you could really progress as a player. Not just technique and not think about conception, not just conception and don't think about technique. They both have to go together. So you have to practice your scales and practice, get on the bow and practice the intonation if you're a bass player, for instance. But at the same time, you've got to, have that conception. I'm kind of hoping that that the people the students that come to a school like NYU or all the other schools, all the other great schools, and they feel they have talent in what they do, that they know that, living the creative life is its own reward, and maybe potentially the major part of the reward they're going to get. There's a real disparity here between how much time and effort and intensity you put into learning this and keeping it up, and the incredible level of skills that you can attain in order to do things like this, and go travel around the world and get off a plane and go make great art without any sleep with some people that you've never played with before, and so on and so forth. It's an incredible skill level, and it's kind of taken for granted sometimes. But having said that, I think it is possible to have a good career and to make a good living in this business. And my experience is that what really helps is it helps have some love for what you're doing, and always remind yourself of it, especially when the going gets rough, is to be able to reach out to the people that you're playing with, the people that you're working with, and to have just to break down. I mean, break down the wall between the people, yourself, and what you're trying to do, and your own frustrations and your own goals and stuff, and to be able to put that in the service towards making music together and making something together. This doesn't only go for like the musicians you're playing with. It's for the people you're working with. All the people that you're working with. If you can like look at that, everybody that's engaged in the endeavor that you're involved in, whether it's the musicians you're playing with, the person that's like booking you, the audience, most of all, that's listening to you, that you're all in the same side, you're all part of the same process. You can reach out to them. Not to be naive and not to be taken advantage of by people, but also like, granting that, the best, of the human nature that can possibly be, out there for everybody. So what I'm trying to say with this sort of convoluted sort of thing is like you have to have a good attitude, and you have to get along with people well. That's really important. Okay, it's really important to be versatile, and to be versatile. The greatest thing you can do, and this is what makes the role of a sideman a really exalted job, is if you can do somebody else what somebody else needs you to do, and to be able to put some of your own individuality into it, then you're functioning at a really high level of skill. You're also functioning at a really sort of, in a way, a very precise level of creativity that you can take into your own stuff and use to make your own music into a very finely honed creation, So developing that ability to like, do, what needs to be done for somebody else's gig, and to be versatile enough to play, well, you can be versatile within jazz music, being able to play a gig and play in the style of the Count Basie band or the Duke Ellington band one night, and then go over and play like Woody Shaw or Freddie Hubbard the next night, and then go and do something completely different, then go on a Latin gig, on a salsa gig, and phrase that way, which could be completely different than the way you phrased just the night before, but to be into it and to be idiomatic. And then also always be able to throw a little bit of your own thing into it wherever you are, because that's what's needed. If you're doing that, then you're really playing jazz all the time. You're really being creative all the time. I mean, that's important too, to keep yourself satisfied as you keep going. I know a lot of great musicians that can get a little bit beaten down because they never feel like they've put themselves into it enough. But I think you can make the decision, like, to always be able to put yourself into it a little bit, but know the fine line where you're playing the gig right. That's as a sideman. Everybody's got to go through that. So if I have a band and I get a band together, I want people that are going to play my gig, but I also want people that are going to play and enjoy themselves and play their behinds off. And in order to do that, they've got to be expressing their individuality. If you can do those things, then then if you're versatile, you can satisfy yourself while being useful for others. Then you have you have everything that you need in order to have a long career and to put yourself in the position where you can make a living doing this while you're sitting and getting the stuff together that you want to get together for yourself, for your own music somewhere down the line. That's the way I've always conceived it. I've been a big advocate. The story was always in my head is that of going through all these apprenticeships, like the apprenticeships I've gone through with Horace Silver, with Art Blakey, with Eddie Palmieri, with all the other great like mentors that I've had, Charles McPherson, Buddy Montgomery, and that, you know, that I'm learning all these things and I'm putting more layers on my onion that I can use, you know, that I am using. You know, when I play my own music, which I'm doing increasingly more and more now over the last few years, and am continuing to do. But you know, I would always. It wouldn't mean the same to me if I hadn't had all these experiences with with the others, you know, with the great mentors that I've had. So that's another thing I'd say for young musicians is to, you know, even in a sort of climate that we have that encourages the idea that maybe there aren't any mentors left, or that there, you know, that young cats have got to just kind of stick together with themselves, and there aren't any opportunities to apprentice. There still are. You know, you can learn things from all kinds of people. You know, they don't have to be famous in order to learn from them. You know, I mean, I grew up with some people, you know, that you never heard of that I learned so much from. You know, there are guys like that in every town.